Hi, my name is Rani, and I'll be going through this maze with you today. Don't worry, if we get lost, at least we'll be together. First things first, take your time in discovering this maze. There's no need to rush. And also, listen up for this sound. These bells tell you when to start walking towards the next little nook in the maze. So, when I first started thinking about Chinese whispers, I had this idea of wanting to make a show about my identity. As a Chinese Indonesian actor and artist who's lived in Australia for more than half my life. But there was just one problem. Living here in Australia since I was 13, I didn't have any Chinese Indonesian friends. At all. So, I thought that I would put on an awesome play together with other Chinese Indonesian women about being Chinese Indonesian women. I went to lots of church group meetings all around Melbourne to talk with other Chinese Indonesians, and I started finding Chinese Indonesian women to be in my theater workshops. The couple of workshops that I led were great, if I do say so myself. But then, some of the women were too busy to commit to the workshops. So then I started interviewing each of them in their own homes or over lunch and dinner in a nice restaurant or something. And I asked them about all sorts of things. How they perceive themselves, did they consider themselves Chinese, Indonesian, Australian, or some other combination? I asked them about their dreams, songs they liked, how they came to Australia, their favorite dishes to cook, what the point of life was.
Zombie, terus I'm really scared of them. I know they're not real, but I'm still scared of them. What if that's happening to you kayak in I Am Legend or you the only survivor? How are you gonna survive gitu? Aku takut banget. Jadi kayak all of this kayak quite affected me.
Chicken or lots of food. Like it looks like a dinner party,
Yeah,
but they're food for the ancestors
Yeah.
and food for the gods basically. And then
Water. Lakes. Calm, yes. The water is always calm. The clinking sound, rippling.
Maybe one last question. Apa yang paling kamu takuti dalam hidup ini?
Kejadian atau orang atau apa aja. Barusan tadi
But
pagi
there was one thing that I was unsure about asking them. It was a terrible event that took place in Indonesia when I was 12, and was probably the reason why a lot of them were now living in Australia, like me. Up until 1998, the year of the tiger, I had had what you would call an idyllic childhood in Indonesia. My parents wanted to instill in me a love of the country, and as a result, they took me traveling with them all across that nation archipelago. I had climbed mountains, swum in the rivers, scuba dived in the oceans. I had seen 3 different colors of beaches, black, pink, and white. But then, the May 1998 riots happened. And it caused a schism, a fracture in my identity. Back then, at the age of 12, I came home one day from school and asked my mother, "Ma, kita ini orang Cina. Ma, are we Chinese?" To which she firmly said, "No, we are Indonesian." My own brother left soon after the riots, and 1 year later, I followed him to Perth, Western Australia. Do you hear those bells? That's your cue to start walking. So come on, let's go. Even after 16 years have passed, I still wasn't sure that it was okay to ask other Chinese Indonesian women about these events. But then I met and spoke to the writer, Dewi Anggriani, and some of the things she said gave me the courage to go back and have a closer look at the May riots of 1998. It is late summer in 2014, and I am meeting Ibu Dewi, a Chinese-Indonesian writer who lives in a rambling house filled with hundreds of books in the forests of Eltham, Victoria. I bring some cake with me because I think it's always nice to bring some kind of little gift when visiting someone. I'm not always able to afford cake, so this is pretty special. Ibu Dewi greets me at the door. She's a small woman, but big in spirit. She reminds me of my grandma. One of the rooms in her house has glass windows from floor to ceiling, and all you can see is a wall of green, shimmering leaves. We sit down and share a cup of tea.
Yeah, I'm Dewi Anggriani. I'm a writer. I'm a writer of fiction and non-fiction. I write novels, short stories, and I also write essays. And I have been a journalist, an essayist, and now I'm still in journalism, but I write columns. I heard about the rapes, the mass rapes, and it was so horrific. I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it because I thought at that time that was just too horrific, too horrible, too cruel. No way could Indonesians do that. That was my self rationalization. Until one day, a friend of mine asked me whether I wanted to meet a rape victim who had been successfully smuggled out of Indonesia and was in Melbourne. So at that time I thought, wow, yes, of course, as a journalist, I wanted to know, But my friend said, you will not come as a journalist. You will come as a fellow human being. I couldn't speak to anyone for 2 days. I was feeling guilty. Right? Looking back now, I felt guilty because I doubted that the rapes ever happened, and I felt guilty because it was irrational. Because I just didn't know what to do. I couldn't help. I hadn't done anything to help. Well, I knew.
So you felt you had to do something about it?
Yeah, I thought so.
Because
I'm a woman.
bagaimana itu bisa terjadi? Brenda Ustaz. Ini apa yang melakukannya? Siapa yang merancang? Brenda Ustaz. Kenapa ini masih menderita? Why don't see my voices? How can we talk about this? Why is there so much silence? Why is there still so much secrecy? Why don't the younger generation know? How can we talk about this? What did it do? Kenapa generasi muda tidak tahu tentang semua ini? Siapa yang merancang hal ini? Or why is there still so much silence? Why is there still so much fear? Why is there still so much secrecy? How can we talk about this? Why don't we ever talk about this? Wow, Cina.
Tapi sekali lagi yang bukan menakutkan ya, tapi gentar ya, rasa gentar gitu, bahwa kenapa orang bisa menjadi sedemikian marah dan amuk ya, amuk istilah yang tepat itu amuk masa. Karena lalu menjadi sangat kacau balau. I saw fires and people were just like, I don't know what kind of evil were inside them. You can see anger, so much hatred in their eyes. We were so scared. But I kept telling the driver, move on, and just tell them, yell at them that we try to help. We have food, we have water, we want to help.
This is Kalina Supeli. I knew her back when I was only 12 years old. She is a very brave woman and very well known for her work in fighting for human rights in Indonesia. Carlina traveled in the back of an ambulance, helping people when the riots were in full swing. She shared some of her memories of that time with me.
I remember a family with 3 children, all of them, 3 girls, let's say. And they raped the mother first in front of the children, and gang rape. Yeah, we didn't talk about just rape. We talk about gang rape, and then they also raped the children, the girls, and based on witness. I can't remember 1 or 2 of the girls were thrown into the fire.
How can something so violent happen? How can something so violent be orchestrated to happen? One of the big question marks for me in asking people about the May riots of 1998 was why I should be doing this at all, and why now, 16 years on. Isn't it a little bit, or a lot, too late? The May riots of 1998 exploded simultaneously across several major cities in Indonesia in the first half of the month of May 1998. The violence was largely targeted at Chinese Indonesian neighborhoods, shopping and business districts, and brutally violated Chinese Indonesian women and killed thousands of people who were burnt alive as a result of deliberately lit fires across several major cities in Indonesia: Palembang, Solo, Surabaya, Medan, and Jakarta, the city where I was born. The riots can't be separated from the political and economic turmoil that Indonesia was experiencing at the time. No perpetrators or masterminders of the violence have ever been questioned or brought to justice. Can I ask a bigger social question? Yeah? What do you think it does to a society when something that an event that violent that happens in that society is denied by the majority of people and or shrouded in ignorance by the majority of people? What do you think what effect does that have on that society, do you think?
well, it stunts the growth of that society, the mental growth. That's why I wanted to encourage people to accept, to look back and accept we have dark spots in our history, and accept it and confront it instead of saying no, it never happened. We were not capable of doing. Well, we were. We were capable of doing that. Look what happened to. Look what you did to East Timor. Look what happened in May. Look what happened in 1965. Confront it and bite the bullet. You have to do that before you can go on, and before you can say that a nation of adults, right, to our children and grandchildren. That's what happened.
Our conversation made me realize that I couldn't speak about my identity without speaking about the May riots of 1998. Around the same time, I met an American poet, Mark Gonzalez, who said something that stayed with me. We cannot heal what we will not face. I turned the hatred that was targeted at Chinese Indonesians inwards and towards myself. As a teenager, I began to hate my eyes, my skin color, which was not quite brown, yet not quite yellow, yet not quite fair. I thought that there was something wrong with me for being Chinese, and that's why the riots had happened. At university, I started learning about how this hatred was something that was nurtured over 3 centuries of Dutch colonialism of the now Indonesian archipelago. The Dutch divided the hundreds of ethnic groups in what is now called Indonesia into 3 very basic categories: European at the very top, Vreemde Oosterlingen, Chinese in the middle, Inlander, natives at the very bottom of this hierarchy. The Dutch took advantage of the resentment that so-called natives felt towards the Chinese and even encouraged it. So, I realized that the violence that erupted during the May riots of 1998 were only the latest incident of a long history of racism towards Chinese Indonesians in Indonesia. Armed with this knowledge, I felt like I finally understood something of my place in this history, that I was the victim of systemic racism. But then I met someone who challenged this point of view. I met Fifi, a 19-year-old Chinese-Indonesian woman who I came to see in her apartment. Out of the window, we could see the looming skyscrapers of the Melbourne CBD on a grey, cheerless day. We sit on her couch, resting our hands on small pillows as Fifi talks to me. And of course, I asked her about all sorts of things rather than talking straight away about the riots or anything to do with race. I asked Fifi what she thought happened to us after death.
I think there's space between space. So within this room, for example, there's another space. Like if this room was a piece of paper, like there's sheets and sheets and sheets of paper, and one of those paper and a piece of that paper is a different universe. And I believe that I think spirits roam around within these papers, these sheets of papers, and that sometimes they might end up on our sheet of paper.
So we're walking around in a particular sheet of paper,
Yeah.
and that's our dimension.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that?
Huh? I don't know. I think it's been all like the anime and all the stuff I've been watching, and like.
Fifi's whole family became scattered all over the world after the May riots. It was a completely life-changing experience for her too. And I felt like I'd found a bit of a kindred spirit in her. But as the conversation was winding down, I started to feel a bit uncomfortable about some of the things that Fifi was saying. especially what she thought about so-called native Indonesians, or pribumi, or the not-so-nice label of tiko, as she called them.
I don't think I've recognized the pribumi as pribumi before. I've always seen all of us were equal until this one incident happened and I started calling them tiko, pribumi, whatever. The dispute was what really caused me to start differentiating between Chinese and pribumi. And to this day, I've never spoken to them ever again. Okay, so she's born from my uncle, but
Right,
she doesn't have our blood, the rest of us. Like I think that the whole the Chinese in her, the Dutch in her, I'm talking about my cousins, Dutch in her, the English in her, they're all gone in that batch of children. They're all just tiko and pribumi to me now, even if they're like halfies of Chinese or whatever.
What do you think about the argument that maybe it has nothing to
It's
do with their
them
ethnicity?
being a pribumi.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there'll always be bad people. There'll always be bad people. Like, there are even bad people in my dad's family who only wants his money and stuff, even though they're related by blood. Even though they're Chinese, there'll always be bad people. But the fact that they are this specific race and how they I'm looking for a word, how they look down on our race makes me differentiate between the us two. They've created an us and them. But I do have a few friends in Melbourne who are pure Indonesians, and I really like hanging out with them sometimes because they're intelligent and they don't act like pribumi.
Is it possible that the racism went both ways? When I asked the writer Dewi Anggriani her opinion on this, she spoke about how the Chinese were used by the native Indonesian power elite as a kind of scapegoat for the rest of the Indonesian population's anger and unhappiness. However, as you'll come to hear, the Chinese weren't blameless either.
There are reasons for the hate.
What are those reasons?
In terms of the last the 30 odd years of Suharto's rule, they were politically used by the regime. They were stripped of any political power, so they were completely dependent on the power elite, and so they were manipulated. That a few of them will be given facilities, so they will become super rich, and they become the showcase. Here's the Chinese. Look, they're so rich, and you're so poor.
Yeah.
So, and they nurture that, right? That image, so that when something happens and people are dissatisfied with the power elite, because they are afraid to attack the power elite because they're armed. So you can attack the proxy, those who collude with us,
Those who colluded with the elite? Yeah.
Yeah, well, not all Chinese people colluded with the elite, but that's the image already made. So that's the reason. One reason. Second reason is they themselves are not aware that is going on. So many, not all of them, many of them behave which corroborate the image, right? They're ostentatious, they behave, they treat the non-Chinese people like that, right? And this is not lost on the people. So it reinforces the image. So that's another reason. And they do even now still feel that they are actually superior to the natives. Right? At that time, there was no question. They felt superior to the natives. Right? I want people to believe to accept that they themselves are racist. Therefore, they can see why other people are racist towards them. Right? That kind of understanding will start the what I call the dismantling of the frame, right? As long as they still believe that they are not racist, other people are, then the frame will always be intact.
And yet, when I went back to Indonesia in June of this year, I saw so much tolerance and understanding between different groups of people. I went on an expedition to visit hundreds of women across eastern Indonesia. One event I went to was opened by a woman praying in Arabic, the Muslim way, and closed by a woman praying in Indonesian, the Catholic way. Not to mention that all of us on the expedition came from different ethnic groups and were interacting with people of different ethnic groups. And night after night, we danced, arms linked together in a swirling circle under the stars. But at the same time, I still saw how being Chinese and Christian were used as slurs during the campaign for the presidential election. There were rumors that Jokowi, who has now been elected president, had Chinese ancestry and was Christian, when in actual fact he was neither of those things. But being Chinese and Christian was still used to incite fear in the majority Muslim and non-Chinese populations. Nonetheless, the racial hatred and resentment was still a part of how people thought and felt. And I was afraid that if they remained unexamined, the potential for something like the May riots to happen again will still be present, lying there like a sleeping monster. I wanted to find out what Kalina Supeli has to say about where the hatred comes from. She says that under the dictatorship of Suharto, which ended in 1998, for 32 years people were not allowed to have open discussions about race, ethnicity, or religion. Kalina uses the metaphor of a volcano to describe how over 32 years, tensions between ethnic, racial, and religious groups were allowed to build to the point of near eruption. The May riots was one such eruption. Three centuries went on. The color of my skin, not quite brown, not quite yellow, not quite brown. Thanks for staying with me. Now, I'm not a religious person myself, but for Chinese Whispers, I've come to meet people at Indonesian churches all over Melbourne. I've been to churches in Laverton, Albion, Port Melbourne, the Melbourne CBD, Glen Waverley, Box Hill. Churches attended by the elderly to the very young, where there were hundreds of people in massive halls to only 20 or so people, in people's homes, where the dining table became an altar. There's something in me that resists the religious nature of the communities I came across, but on the other hand, Chinese Whispers is a kind of prayer, of remembrance. And anyway, I enjoy going to Mass because it forces me to have a different rhythm to the one I normally live in. It's a moment of quiet for me, an invitation to reflect. At one point, I spoke to a community figure who has been active in the Indonesian Catholic family of Melbourne for decades. She also clearly remembered the weekend service in Box Hill following the May 1998 riots. Normally, where there would only be about 200 people attending, that weekend the room was overflowing with Chinese Indonesian people who had just fled the violence in Jakarta. Their faces, etched with worry, told this story better than I ever could.
Pokoknya baru dari airport